Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is going to be pretty different from the what if scenarios I've been doing so far. Instead of imagining what if a Doctor had stayed on for another season or series, I'm going to instead do one all about what if one had left earlier than they did in our timeline. This might be the only what if of this type, so it should be pretty interesting. Anyway, here is what if Tom Baker had left earlier. Now, there's a few ways this could have gone. Obviously, we know that in our timeline, Tom Baker stayed on for 7 years, making him the longest running Doctor, a distinction he still holds to this very day. But in that time, there are quite a few occasions where he could have left earlier. One such example would be that he leaves at the end of season 14 alongside departing producer Philip Hinchcliffe. This is an idea that I know quite a few fans have pondered about over the years. But he could also have left at the end of season 15, season 16, or even season 17, although that last one might have been a little bit tricky if the untransmitted Shada had been intended to be his final story. However, the potential exit of his that intrigues me the most would be the season 15 one. You see, I think the season 14 one would have been a bit too early, as the amount of stories Tom Baker would then have would have been less than all of his predecessors were, and would only be slightly more than both Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy would later get. And as I said earlier, plenty of people have already pondered about what if he'd left at the end of season 14. So that's why I'm going to go with season 15. 23 stories spread over 4 seasons. Sounds about right to me. But if Tom Baker had left, how would that affect season 15's final story, The Invasion of Time? Well, let's say that Leela gets killed in a fight with a Sontaran whilst they're all inside the TARDIS. Rodan would then become the new companion, with K9 Mark 1 staying on. Now we come to the question of how exactly would the 4th Doctor regenerate? Well, let's say that the blast of the DMAT gun doesn't just cause the Doctor to lose his memory, it mortally wounds him instead, with Rodan and K9 rushing to his side when he manages to stumble back into the TARDIS, before collapsing to the floor. And now we come to the question of who would take over from Tom Baker. Who would be the alternate 5th Doctor? Well, I don't think it would be Peter Davison for a start. Davison's casting was very much down to John Nathan Turner, and since JNT wasn't the show's producer yet, and the show's actual then producer Graham Williams would doubtless have his own ideas as to who should play the Doctor, I doubt very much that Peter Davison would have ended up becoming the 5th Doctor a few seasons earlier. Plus, Davison has himself stated that he wasn't really a fan of the Graham Williams era, and its, quote, undergraduate humour. So I'm going to go with somebody else instead. But who exactly? It would certainly need to be somebody who could still have worked with the Graham Williams era's emphasis on humour. It could be someone who had already been considered to play the Doctor before. Graham Crowden, Bernard Cribbins, Fulton Mackay or Jim Dale could have worked, but an idea that I really like would be David Dixon of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy 1981 TV show fame. And I have to give credit to Carrie from Soundsmith Productions for this idea. So I'm going to go with David Dixon. Now, interestingly enough, if Dixon had have been cast, he would have then been known as the youngest actor to play the Doctor, as he was just 30 years old at the time. And slight spoilers for how this timeline is going to work out here, he'd end up stealing Pete Davidson's thunder a bit. Poor Pete Davidson. Although Matt Smith would obviously still end up becoming the youngest actor later on. Also, just because I think it looks quite doctory, let's imagine that Dixon's Ford Prefect costume from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is his 5th Doctor's outfit. Hello, Future Bill here. I just realised that I never actually talked about what the title sequences would be like in this alternate timeline. So basically, for the alternate seasons 16 to 18, just imagine a David Dixon version of the first Tom Baker intro, the one with the diamond logo and everything. And then for his last season, the alternate season 19, just imagine the Sid Sutton, Peter Howell title, the Sid Sutton title sequence of the Peter Howell theme, but with David Dixon's face rather than Tom Baker's. So, yeah, that's that for title sequences. Apologies that I forgot to include that. Anyway, the alternate season 16 might have had to start quite differently to our timelines. David Dixon would have to have time to settle into the role, which would probably take up most of his first story, as had been the case for Patrick Troughton, Jon Pertwee and Tom Baker, with each of their respective first stories. Now, Dixon's first story could have been the Ribos operation, and indeed that could still have set up the Key to Time arc, but I don't know if it would have been such a good idea to introduce a new Doctor and then immediately have him set off on a season-long story arc. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to save the Key to Time arc for the following season, season 17, and have this alternate season 16 be more about just introducing the new Doctor. So for this entirely different season 16, we're once again going to have to take a look at some of the unmade stories that were mooted around that time. Thankfully, there's actually quite a good number of unmade stories that we can use this time. So this alternate season 16 will be comprised of number 1, the Stones of Blood with all the Key to Time elements removed and with the introduction of the new Doctor. Number 2, the Pirate Planet, again with all the Key to Time elements removed. Number 3, Shield of Zarek, which was originally supposed to have been the 4th story of season 16. It would have dealt with the Doctor meeting Robin Hood, who would have been revealed to not be the hero he was meant to be, but a villain instead. Number 4, the Lords of Misrule, which was originally supposed to have been the 5th story of season 16. It would have dealt with the population of a planet called Tetran being enslaved by robots called the Shadow Lords. Number 5, the Divided, not much of which is known about unfortunately. Number 6, and finally Killers of the Dark, which was supposed to have been the final story of season 15. But after it became clear that it wasn't achievable on the show's small budget, producer Graham Williams and then script editor Anthony Reed had written The Invasion of Time in its place. Even though they didn't revisit the script in our timeline, let's say for the sake of this alternate timeline, they did, and made it more achievable with the limited money they had to work with. This would have been set on Gallifrey and would have the Doctor fight against cat-like people. Rodan would stay behind with K9 Mark 1 to help mediate a peace between the cat people and the Time Lords. And then we get to the alternate season 17, which would be almost exactly like our timeline season 16 and would feature the Key to Time arc. But some unmade stories would have to replace the Stones of Blood and the Pirate Planet, as they've obviously already been used for the alternate season 16. Let's say that the Doomsday Contracts and the Tearing of the Veil replace them. So the alternate season 17 would go like this. Number 1, the Ribos operation. Number 2, the Doomsday Contract. Number 3, the Tearing of the Veil. 4, the Androids of Tara. 5, the Power of Kroll. And number 6, the Armageddon Factor. And Romana would obviously still be introduced in this alternate Key to Time season, with Mary Tam and Lalla Ward still playing her first and second incarnations respectively. So yeah, 2 female Time Lord companions in a row, as in Rodan and Romana. But why not? And then the alternate season 18 would be our timeline's season 17. There probably wouldn't be any changes to the run of stories, although maybe Shada is somehow able to be completed in this alternate timeline. And then the alternate season 19 would be the same as our timeline's season 18. It would also be David Dixon's final season as a Doctor, with him regenerating into Peter Davison in the alternate Logopolis. Pete Davidson would then be in the very unenviable position of having his first season during the show's 20th anniversary. What could happen would be that you'd still have him with Adric, Nyssa and Tegan, but with a mixture of our timeline's season 19 and season 20 stories. So maybe something like this. Number 1, Castrovalva, 2, Arc of Infinity, 3, Kinder, 4, Morgan Undead, 5, Terminus, 6, Enlightenment, and number 7, Earthshock. And then the 20th anniversary special would be the 6 Doctors, which would still be the same story as the 5 Doctors, but with one extra Doctor to now deal with. Maybe with Tom Baker having been gone longer and not been quite as much typecast as the Doctor, perhaps he would actually take part in the 20th anniversary special this time round. It might have been a bit weird for David Dixon to come back though, since he'd only just left the year before. Pete Davidson's era would then continue with the alternate season 21, which would be comprised of the remaining stories from our timeline's seasons 19 and 20. So it would go 1, Snake Dance, 2, Fort Doomsday, 3, The Visitation, 4, Black Orchid, 5, Time Flight, 6, The King's Demons, and 7. I'm also going to have Resurrection of the Daleks in this alternate season 21 as well, so that it ends on a bang. The remaining stories from our timeline season 21 would then make up the alternate season 22. So basically it would be moving each season back by 1 most of the time. So that would be 1, Warriors of the Deep, 2, The Awakening, number 3, Frontios, number 4, Planet of Fire, number 5, to make up for Resurrection being moved to the previous season, there would be another story for the now 6th Doctor and Perry. How about the unmade story The Rogue TARDIS, about a Time Lord who has regenerated and merged with their TARDIS? Number 6, The Caves of Androzani, and 7, The Twin Dilemma, which would still be Colin Baker's first story, but this time as the 7th Doctor, not the 6th. How would all of this affect each companion's introduction and departure? Well, Adric would still die in Earthshock, whilst Nyssa would now leave in Time Flight. Poor Nyssa. Tegan would still leave in Resurrection of the Daleks, and Turlough could maybe be introduced in Time Flight, with him being among the passengers on one of the Concords perhaps. He would also still leave in Planet of Fire. Chameleon would still be introduced in the King's Demons and then get killed off in Planet of Fire, and Perry would also still join the Doctor at the end of it too, as in Planet of Fire. Maybe, due to Tegan technically leaving a bit earlier, you could have either Will and or Jane from The Awakening join the Doctor, Turlough and Chameleon for a bit. Although, as much as I like both those characters and wish they'd been full-time companions, maybe they would have made the TARDIS just a bit too crowded. Besides, what would be the best story for them to leave in? Would they leave before Peter Davison's own departure, or stay on with Colin Baker? It would all be pretty difficult, so let's just say that they still don't become companions. As much as this alternate timeline interests me, I don't really like how it would have affected Peter Davison's era. Seasons 19 and 21 are some of the best in the show's entire history, in my personal opinion. So to mess about with them as much as this timeline does just isn't really to my liking. So, as an alternative, or second scenario if you will, you could always imagine that seasons 16 to 18 still play out the exact same, but with David Dixon's alternate 5th Doctor, not with Tom Baker's 4th. Maybe to solve the whole introducing a new Doctor in the middle of the Key to Time issue, you could just add an extra 4-parter to season 16 to serve as Dixon's first story, and make the Armageddon Factor 4 episodes long rather than 6, so that an extra story would have been slightly more possible to the show's limited budget at the time. But maybe that would clash a bit with the rest of season 16, having the first story be more or less entirely disconnected from the rest. Anyway, so there's my take on what if Tom Baker had left earlier. But what did you think? Do you like my take on it or not? And would you have done anything differently? And which of the technically 2 scenarios did you prefer? Please let me know in the comments section below. Anyway, so thanks for watching, hope you liked it. Please don't forget to press that subscribe button below, as well as press the bell icon at the side of it, so that you'll stay notified of when all my new videos come out. This channel currently has 1,046 subscribers as of the time of writing and recording this video. But if we can get to 2,500 by the end of this year, then I will do another Q&A where you can ask me whatever questions you want. Just keep them polite, please. Also, please rate, and I shall see you all in another video. So, until next time, bye bye!